Brandon, the AK guy, told me that you were talking smack behind my back about my weak hands.
Brandon has been scheming all this.
He's been playing us against each other. Brandon, the AK guy, you're dead.
What is up, you sexy YouTube mother lovers? I'm filming remote today because I decided, I was gonna take a vacation for my health. But as luck would have it, in the Airbnb, we do have a whiteboard. And I was thinking it's been a while since we did a whiteboard of knowledge video. I know some of you guys out there miss it. I get requests for them a lot, and I get requests for one thing specifically. You wanna know how full auto AKs work, don't you, Squidward? Yes, I'm going to risk the big PP slap from YouTube and do a technical breakdown of how full auto AKs actually function. Now, I do want to point out this is not a how-to, and I am not telling you to do this if you do not have the proper licensure. But it is perfectly legal for a manufacturing FFL in the United States with an SOT to manufacture post-86 machine guns. There's plenty of guides out there on how to do it. I just don't want to put that on YouTube because, well, I like my job, and you probably wouldn't like federal prison. So it should go without saying that this is going to be an educational video only. Don't try this at home. But to be honest with you guys, I myself didn't really fully understand how full auto AKs worked, at least not well enough to do it myself until I started manufacturing them. So for all of you diehard AK fanatics out there, even though maybe you can't own one, it's definitely cool to know how they work. About a Kalashnikov.
A few moments later.
There we go. See, I still got it. But before we get too in the weeds, I did want to tell you guys about a new sponsor of the channel that I'm really glad to have on board. That sponsor is actually a unique opportunity from Young Americans for Liberty. They're currently recruiting field staffers to help elect liberty-minded candidates across the country. I'm gonna put this down before I stab someone in the eye. What you'll be doing is helping elect hardcore candidates that are dedicated to preserving the Second Amendment and the rest of our rights guaranteed to us as Americans. And the Second Amendment. If you want to be a part of the fight and actually make a difference in our insane political climate in 2020, you can join one of the campaigns going on from September 19th until November 3rd. Gas is covered, housing is completely provided for, and you'll be compensated $3,700 for your involvement in the program. You're literally getting paid to help protect gun rights, versus Wayne LaPierre that just kind of gets paid. If you're interested, please click the link in the description and in the pinned comment. It helps us out, it helps them out, and realistically, it helps all of us out. Now, what Young Americans for Liberty didn't know when they reached out to me is I actually worked for them while I was in college. I did some work with YAL, so it's actually kind of funny that they reached out. I do think it's actually a great opportunity for you guys, and it might actually make a difference. So click the link in the description if you're interested. Let's get back to the machine gun. So the auto sear pin hole is known as the third pin, or the naughty pin. The naughty third hole that can get you in trouble with the government and your wife. So first, a quick recap, just to remind you what everything does on the semi-auto one, because this will be important. So you have your two axis pins. The first one in the rear holds the trigger. What this is, actually up here, is a hook that rocks on this pin that catches the hammer, which is what this pin is. So when the gun is cycling, the bolt carrier moves to the rear and the bolt moves to the rear as well. So the hammer gets folded downward this direction. That's, downward. And it gets caught in the hook of the trigger when you let off the trigger. So if the only way it gets caught there is if you let off the trigger, why aren't all AKs full auto? Well, for one, that wouldn't work. You'd probably just have hammer follows and potentially out of battery detonation, which that's not good. Unless you're as sick of 2020 as I am, in which case, debatable. But the reason this actually works is because of another part that actually also rotates on this trigger axis pin. This would be your disconnector. It's basically another hook coming from the opposite direction that is kind of in a cradle in the middle of the two sides of the trigger itself. Now you see this tab up there at the top of the hammer. When this comes down, it catches on that disconnector. Now the disconnector only engages if the trigger is actually pulled forward. That also, because it's rocking the same cradle, it goes up when the trigger goes back. So it only functions to catch the hammer if the trigger is depressed. Like, the trigger's pulled, not it needs to get laid. So that's what that tab up here is for on the hammer. So yeah, this is the face that actually strikes the bolt, slapping that firing pin on the ass. Am I right? Of course, when the bolt reciprocates to the rear, it folds back down, and this tab right up here catches on the disconnector. So again, quick recap. Hammer is reset, ready to go, ready to fire. You pull the trigger, it comes off of that little hook there because it rotates forward, and then it releases the hammer, which is under, obviously spring tension, or Slavic magic, whichever you prefer. Hammer goes forward, fires the round, bolt reciprocates and moves the hammer back down, and it gets caught on the disconnector, but only while the trigger is pulled. That is why it only fires one round. It catches the hammer from doing that again. So you let off the trigger, it drops from the disconnector, which rocks back as you're dropping the trigger, and it catches on the hook of the trigger again. And now you're in the same place that you started, ready to go. As soon as you pull the trigger, you're past the disconnector, so it's gonna fire another round, let that hammer go back forward. Proceed to mag dump into trash. Let's say you wanted to mag dump into trash a little faster. That's where we get into the auto sear. Now, unlike some firearms like the Glock and some of the drop-in auto sears for the AR-15, the auto sear for the AK is actually not a regulated part. It is totally fine to own one. In fact, a lot of parts kits, at least they used to, they would come with the auto sear, which is just all kinds of temptation. I don't know why they did that. Why shouldn't I keep it? So the auto sear looks like this. I just drew these parts kind of small because it may shock you to believe this, but I'm not perfect. So your auto sear pinhole is going to be more or less right about here. So you got down, up, down. So your front part loops up like that. And that is why merely having a full auto sear and a third pin in your receiver does not make your gun able to go full auto yet. There's one more thing you need. Actually, two more. Okay, I will get to it. Although, to be warned, it is still a machine gun. Anything with the auto sear hole drilled, I believe, is considered to be a machine gun by the ATF. Once a machine gun, always a machine gun. You drill that hole, you're going to jail. Ironically, and kind of fucked up, you are now possessing, without having done any violent crime, a felony that can potentially put you in jail for longer than raping someone. They want to throw the book at you, and this is the only thing you did, up to 10 years and a $250,000 fine. Freedom. So anyway, the other thing you have to do to the receiver itself involves the lower rail. Now, if you're not familiar, from a top down, the AK rails kind of look like this. So this is your top rail that's bent inward slightly. It's kind of crimped at the top, and that's what retains the bolt carrier itself. Now, obviously, we're going to assume that this goes for longer in both directions, just pointing that out. Then you have your lower rails that stick out a little bit further and also include your shark fin ejector. That is what kicks out the empty pews, so you can load more pews back in the chamber. Now, on a semi-auto receiver, your right side rail does fuck all. Well, besides from stopping the bolt from rotating prematurely and jamming up your entire gun, that's kind of nice. But it has an additional function on the full auto, which is a slot cut out specifically for your auto sear. So this is a bit exaggerated, but you will get the idea. The scale on the rails is not 1-to-1, but I'm trying to illustrate a point. The top rails actually bend over a little bit and kind of obscure where the slot is for the auto sear, so I just wanted to show you kind of in a more exaggerated way. This slot here is a channel that allows your auto sear to rock back and forth. So Brandon, why does it have to rock in the channel that is directly in the way of the lower rail? Well, hypothetical viewer, excellent question. That leads me around to that other thing I said that you needed. Believe it or not, most semi-auto AKs actually have this still. So let's say this is your bolt carrier. I'm so quasi-ADD about this, I really want to add the gas piston, but no. Drawing time with Brandon. So this is your bolt carrier. For those who don't know, this has one job, to carry the bolt. Actually, it has like 8 jobs, but let's make it simple. This is the part that has your gas piston on the end, charging handle, houses the springs, etc., and also the bolt rotates in a channel called a cam groove inside of here. Now, on top of all those functions, it also has another function on the full auto ones, which is that tab right there. Now, if you have an AK at home, and it was, I guess, an imported AK or a parts kit built AK, go ahead and take it out and take a look at it. If you pull your bolt carrier out and you have a channel that loops down kind of like that, kind of like it's a sideways state of Idaho, then you have a full auto AK bolt carrier group. Congratulations, you're going to jail. No, I'm kidding. You're not going to jail, at least not for that. Now, on the neutered ones, this will not be here. They will actually just cut it flush. This just goes straight. And all that rail there does is reinforce it on the bottom side so that the bolt carrier stays in line with the top rail. Basically, it just keeps it moving forward so it doesn't hop out of the gun or do anything stupid. But we don't have to worry about cuckolded bolt carriers here, so this right here is the little tab that we have. And what that does is, while this little channel right here, I'm just gonna color it in black, that is a channel cut in the side of the bolt carrier that these top rails ride into, like I said, to keep it in line. The bottom of this rides pretty much on the bottom of the lower rails. So when this goes forward through the receiver, I almost drew that to scale with that was subconscious. I didn't mean to do that, but it works really well for this purpose. Basically, just pretend this is about 4 inches lower. So the hammer will have been caught by the trigger at this point. It's moving back forward, and when it's just about in battery, that little tab will have hit the auto sear, canting it forward, meaning it's telling the rest of the gun in a time before computers or text that the bolt carrier has fully gone forward into battery and we are safe to fire another round. Now, if you're keeping up so far, congratulations. You're smart. If you think this is a little complicated, well, hang in there because it's gonna get worse. So now that brings us around to the job of the selector, which is that stamped sheet metal piece on the side here, kind of, I guess, shaped like this, which on a semi-auto AK just is, either safe all the way up or all the way down, caught on a little selector catch here, is fire. Safe, no killing comrades, all the way down, maybe a couple Chechens. Now on the full auto AK, there is a position in the middle between safe and semi-auto. That's, of course, full auto. Fun fact, I've heard the reason that they did that is so that if you were just a typical conscript carrying an AK on safe and you had contact, they didn't want you to blow your load all at once and just do a mag dump into the bushes. So if you were in a panic and adrenaline driven, you'd just throw down the selector just so you could fire your gun. It automatically put you in the semi-auto position. So you'd be more likely to be able to make accurate shots or at least calm down before you dump your combat load out. That could be FUD lore, but that's what I've been told. Now, if we are to rotate this, to look at it from the backside, giggity. So looking at it like if we were the stock looking to the front of the gun from inside, you have the stamped part, that's on the outside, goes all the way across and plugs into the other side of the receiver, swings down, and then comes back up. And another reason I will give Mikhail Kalashnikov a lot of credit is because this is very smart. This is able to now do 2 jobs. So when you're in the safe position, and this is all the way up, this actually blocks, this little Frankenstein bit, this part blocks. There's actually kind of more of a tail here on this trigger to where it can't rock forward, releasing the hammer. So that way you can't ND into one of your comrades, like NFAC. But on top of that, while being the same part, it also, this part over here, could have just the left and right side, but whatever. This side, when in the full auto position, in the middle, allows this to rock up, the trigger to rock up and release the hammer, but it blocks the disconnector. And this is where, like, if this was a German or Swiss gun, they would be tempted to make this action like 4 different parts. This needs to hit this, which levers off of that, hits a spring, which coils something back around, and then allows it to go full auto, whereas Kalashnikov uses a fucking square. One thing I like about Russian gun design, it physically blocks it. It's not a complicated mechanism. Very simple. Simple is also relative. But Brandon, didn't you just say earlier that if you blocked the disconnector, then you would just either be at risk of out-of-battery detonations, or you would just have hammer follows and light strikes and you wouldn't actually fire the gun, you'd just basically make it a jam machine. Yes, I did say that. Don't use my own words against me. That is where the job of the auto sear comes in, which is why a lot of countries actually consider it a safety sear as well as an auto sear. It's actually labeled as a safety sear. Remember this little tab, that little hook there on the front of the hammer? When the hammer rotates back, that tab lines up with that on the back of the auto sear, which is why that is there. When the hammer is fully back, meaning the bolt carrier has already cycled, it's going to be missing the disconnector, but it's going to get hung on the back of the auto sear. See, on a full auto AK, your hammer's kind of fighting a two-front war between the disconnector and the auto sear, because now it can be stopped from two different sides. The only thing that will get this auto sear out of the way of the hammer so it can go do its job and put pews down range is if, this is where it comes full circle, that tab on the bottom of the bolt carrier rides all the way forward, the gun is fully gone into battery, and it knocks that auto sear down because it rides in that lower rail. Knocks it down and out of the way. That hook, the auto sear tilts down this way, gets out of the way of the hammer, and it goes forward. So the only way the weapon can discharge in full auto, theoretically, is if the bolt carrier is all the way forward into battery and it is safe to shoot. So it's not just an auto sear, it really isn't. It is actually a safety sear. This is a sear that is built in to make sure that the gun has a safety that it can't be fired out of battery, which means, for those of, I probably should have explained this earlier. So an out of battery detonation is when you have a round go off and it's not totally in lockup. So if you have a rifle round like a 7.62x39 that the AK is, there's all sorts of different ways that people do it. High pressure rounds can't be direct blowback. They theoretically could, but it's not practical and it's really dumb. In order to stop it from exploding, you need some sort of lockup. People do like falling block, tilting block. This is gas operated rotating bolt mechanism, so it actually locks in the trunnion itself, so it cannot fire until the gas piston. I did a video on this too. So if the gun is designed to require lockup, which I mean, rifle rounds you kind of do, even on bolt guns you have to lock it up, you just manually do it. Instead of having a gas system that cycles it for you, you have to have lockup. So an out of battery detonation on a gun like this would basically mean that your cartridge is in the chamber, it's fully supported by the barrel, but the bolt has not finished turning, meaning that you're not getting full lug contact, it's not fully locked. It's kind of like jumping off a diving board and trying to hit the pool, but instead you hit like 50% pool, 50% concrete, and you fucking die. So all of that pressure that this gun is made to handle is, you know, the lugs may not be doing so hot. This auto sear makes sure that that cannot happen. Just for you guys who are now worried about semi-auto AKs, there is another out of battery safety that is on the bolt carrier here. That little tail there, that actually fits in a recess in the recoil spring assembly. But it also serves as an out of battery safety too, because the hammer, when it goes up, if it's going up too early, and this isn't fully back, the bolt, when it's in full battery, is gonna be sticking out like this, more or less, right under that spot. So if it is not fully sticking out, that tail will take the hit of the hammer and you'll just have a light strike instead of something potentially far worse. So just to recap, the difference between the two, semi-auto and full auto, is that a full auto will A, have an auto sear, but it works in kind of a perfect balance where you have the selector pushing down on the disconnector, stopping the hammer from being caught. So there's nothing stopping this hammer. The trigger is now out of the way, as long as it's pulled. The disconnector is out of the way. The only thing stopping it is the auto sear. So it will automatically release without any action of the user other than holding down that trigger. It will release every time the bolt carrier goes back forward and it is safe to fire. It's actually where you get into rate of fire changes and things. If it's gassed a little lower, it'll run a little bit slower, which I personally like. You can get into like hammer retarders and the rate reducers as well, which are just kind of little piece that hits the hammer a little bit, spring-loaded piece that hits the hammer and slows it down. I like those as well. I like slow mag dumps. I like to take my time. But aside from getting into all of that, it's very, very straightforward. Bolt carrier goes into battery, releases the hammer. Hammer goes back, or goes forward, shoots around, bolt carrier goes back. This resets to catch the hammer. So the hammer stops until the bolt carrier goes back forward. And yeah, you continue to ride the lightning until either you let your finger off the trigger, you run out of ammo, or some other third thing. I think I was gonna say if your rifle jams, but come on. In the immortal words of Duke and Ashley, this bitch just never jams. But realistically, I think that mostly sums it up. I do want to say one more time, please, educational use only, or have the right paperwork, or be working for somebody who does. All the above. There's all sorts of cool ways to get your hands on some cool stuff here. But it's not a bad thing to keep in mind, just in case you one day get the licenses, the Hughes Amendment is repealed and we can actually make new production machine guns legally again as civilians, or 2020 just keeps going the way it's going and nobody gives a shit anymore because rule of law is completely gone. But hey, one of the three. Anyways, guys, I greatly appreciate it. If you watched all the way through the video and you want to see more stuff like this, just let me know in the comments. And be sure to subscribe, it really does help. And if you haven't pressed that notification bell, please do it. A, I miss you. I hate it when you're gone. And B, it does actually help out the channel quite a lot with analytics. The powers that be don't really like gun channels, so any boost in the ratings we can get helps a lot. Also, new AK Guy merch available. Bunker branding. I'll put a link to that as well. And as always, I will see you sexy YouTube mother lovers in the next video. Thanks.
My obsession to make the perfect weapon, like Rasputin's rise to the top.
You know, for security's sake, I won't tell you what country I'm actually in at the moment, but it's funny, all the Airbnbs here come with their own full auto AK. Ain't this place a geographical oddity? Also, probably could have used that for the video.